Before God became infinite, eternal, immaterial, all-knowing, and perfectly good, the gods were often something far more recognizable. They argued, they desired, they took sides in war. They could be deceived, wounded, flattered, and offended. In the cities of ancient Greece, divinity was not primarily a list of abstract attributes. It was a presence woven into sacrifice, festival, ancestry, weather, fertility, victory, and fear. The gods had faces because human communities had given the invisible world a social form. Then a small group of thinkers began asking a dangerous question. What if the gods looked human because humans had imagined them that way? Greek religion was never a single creed enforced by one sacred book. It was a changing landscape of local cults, inherited stories, household rites, civic ceremonies, mystery traditions, and oracles. Homer and Hesiod supplied influential portraits of divine personalities, but ritual practice mattered at least as much as belief. Athena belonged to Athens in a way no universal proposition could capture. Apollo spoke at Delphi. Demeter's grief explained the barrenness of the earth. Myth did not function merely as primitive science. It organized memory, identity, obligation, and the fragile boundary between order and chaos. That world did not disappear when philosophy arrived. The earliest Greek philosophers still wrote within a culture of temples and sacrifice, and many used religious language. What changed was the kind of explanation they demanded. Instead of asking which god sent the storm, they increasingly asked what nature was made of, what governed change, and whether the apparent disorder of experience concealed a rational structure. The shift was incomplete, uneven, and never simply a march from superstition to reason. Yet it opened a new possibility. The divine could be detached from personality and relocated into the architecture of reality itself. Xenophanes of Colophon made the fracture visible. Traveling through the Greek world in the late 6th and early 5th centuries before the Common Era, he attacked the way revered poets attributed theft, adultery, and deception to the gods. More unsettling was his observation that different peoples pictured divinity in their own image. The point was not modern atheism. Xenophanes still spoke of a god unlike mortals in body and mind. But once human projection had been exposed, inherited images could no longer pass as innocent windows onto heaven. The worshipper's face had appeared behind the mask. Xenophanes' surviving fragments are incomplete, and scholars dispute how systematic his theology was. He may have defended one supreme god while allowing lesser gods, or he may have been moving toward a stronger unity. What survives clearly is a rejection of divine anatomy and locomotion as traditionally imagined. His god does not rush from place to place like an anxious king. Divinity becomes mentally powerful, stable, and radically unlike the human body. This is one of the earliest moments in Greek thought when perfection begins to mean distance from ordinary creaturely limitation. Heraclitus of Ephesus approached the problem from another direction. His fragments describe a world of tension, transformation, and hidden order. Fire, river, war, and measure become images for a cosmos that changes without collapsing into nonsense. At the center stands the logos, a term that can suggest account, pattern, or intelligible order. Heraclitus still speaks of gods, yet the deepest authority in his thought is not a divine personality bargaining with mortals. It is the structure through which opposites belong to one world. Divinity begins to resemble the logic of becoming. Parmenides then forced philosophy toward the opposite abyss. In a poem framed as a revelation from a goddess, he argued that what truly is cannot arise from what is not, cannot pass away into what is not, and cannot be divided by non-being. Reality, at the strictest level, must be ungenerated, imperishable, whole, and unmoving. The mythic journey remains, but it delivers an argument that distrusts the senses. Change fills human experience, yet reason seems to demand permanence. A pattern that would haunt theology had appeared. Perfection belongs to what cannot change. Heraclitus and Parmenides became symbolic rivals, one associated with flux, the other with being, although both are more complicated than the later caricature. Together they created a problem that theology would inherit for millennia. If the divine is perfect, can it change? If it acts, does action imply a previous lack? If it responds to prayer, has something new entered its knowledge or will? The living gods of myth moved constantly through time. The god of metaphysics would increasingly be protected from time itself. Power was being redefined as immunity from becoming. Plato did not simply abolish the gods. His dialogues contain prayers, myths, divine signs, cosmic craftsmen, and references to traditional worship. But he subjected stories about divinity to moral and philosophical judgment. In the Republic, guardians must not be taught that gods deceive, quarrel, or cause evil through caprice. A god worthy of the name should be good and not a theatrical shapeshifter. This is a decisive reversal. Tradition no longer determines divine character. An independent idea of goodness becomes the tribunal before which even inherited gods must stand. In Plato's Timaeus, a divine craftsman orders a pre-existing disorderly cosmos by looking toward an intelligible model. The account is presented as a likely story, not a modern scientific report, and interpreters have long debated how literally Plato intended it. Still, its influence was enormous. The world could now be imagined as rationally ordered because intelligence desired what was good. Divinity was connected not merely with force, but with intelligibility, proportion, and benevolent order. Creation became less like a victory over a rival monster and more like geometry imposed upon chaos. Above even the cosmic craftsman in some Platonic interpretations stands the good, the source of intelligibility and value, compared in the Republic to the sun that makes sight and life possible. Plato does not straightforwardly identify the good with the personal God of later monotheism. That identification would be the work of later readers, but the conceptual materials were now available. Ultimate reality could be one, transcendent, the ground of knowledge and beyond ordinary being in dignity and power. The divine was becoming less a character within the universe and more the condition that made a universe understandable. Aristotle transformed the question again. Observing motion and change, he argued that an eternal chain of cosmic motion required an unmoved mover. This first principle does not push the heavens like a hand turning a wheel. It moves as an object of desire and thought, as the final cause toward which perfect celestial motion is directed. Aristotle's God is actuality without unrealized potential, immaterial and eternal. Here, divine perfection becomes philosophical precision. No body, no development, no frustrated possibility, no dependence on anything outside itself. But Aristotle's first mover is not obviously the intimate providential deity later believers would recognize. Its activity is the highest contemplation, thought, thinking itself. Whether and how this divine intellect knows the changing world below has been debated since antiquity. The tension is unmistakable. A being made absolutely complete seems protected from need, surprise, grief, and interruption. Yet those are precisely the conditions through which relationships become personal. Philosophy had created a God immune to the vulnerabilities of myth, while risking a God too perfect to notice the people looking upward. The Stoics offered a different synthesis. For them, divine reason was not sealed beyond the cosmos but active within it. God, nature, providence, reason, and the fiery logos could describe aspects of one living, ordered whole. The cosmos unfolded according to fate, yet human freedom was sought in understanding and consenting to necessity. This divinity was immanent rather than remote, material in a refined Stoic sense rather than purely incorporeal. The sacred had become the rational order of nature, not a visitor entering the world, but the world's own organizing fire. Stoic providence carried psychological power. If events belonged to an intelligible whole, suffering could be faced without imagining the universe had slipped from divine control. But the idea also sharpened the problem of evil. If providence orders everything, what place remains for accident, cruelty, and catastrophe? Stoics developed arguments about the necessity of opposites, the limited viewpoint of individuals, and the moral use of adversity. Later, theology would repeatedly inherit this strategy. Move the observer farther back until local horror appears as one dark thread inside a pattern too large to see. Between Plato and Plotinus, thinkers now called Middle Platonists reworked Plato alongside Aristotle, Stoicism, and religious traditions. They increasingly distinguished a highest transcendent principle from lower divine agents responsible for ordering the visible world. The category is modern, and the thinkers grouped beneath it did not share one doctrine. Yet the period was crucial. Plato's suggestive myths were becoming a more explicit theology of hierarchy, a supreme intellect, intelligible patterns, a world soul, intermediary powers, and a cosmos whose visible levels reflected invisible causes. Philo of Alexandria stood at a cultural crossing. A Jewish interpreter writing in Greek in the 1st century, he read the Hebrew scriptures through philosophical concepts shaped by Platonism and Stoicism. He defended the God of Israel as transcendent, incorporeal, and beyond human passions, while using the Logos to describe divine reason and mediation. His allegorical readings did not merely replace scripture with philosophy. They allowed inherited narrative and ritual to disclose a second intellectual meaning. Abraham's journey could become the soul's journey away from the senses toward God. This fusion had consequences. Biblical language portrays God speaking, regretting, becoming angry, remembering, and responding. Philosophical theology increasingly treated such descriptions as accommodations to limited human understanding, symbolic language rather than literal anatomy or emotional change. The move protected divine perfection, but it also placed interpreters between the text and its apparent meaning. Whenever scripture made God too human, philosophy could translate the embarrassment into metaphor. The ancient critique of projection had not ended anthropomorphism. It had created an elite technology for deciding which human images were permitted. Early Christian writers entered a world already saturated with these arguments. They proclaimed a God who creates, loves, judges, becomes incarnate, and acts within history. At the same time, many used Greek philosophical vocabulary to defend divine unity, transcendence, rationality, and immateriality. This was not a simple pagan corruption of an originally pure message, nor a seamless fulfillment of Greek wisdom. It was an argument conducted across generations. The God of Abraham and the God of the philosophers were brought into the same room, and neither emerged unchanged. Christian disputes about Christ made the pressure intense. How could the eternal enter time? How could the impassible suffer? How could divinity and humanity be united without dissolving either? Terms refined in Greek metaphysics, essence, substance, nature, person, became tools in doctrinal conflict. Councils did not merely copy Plato or Aristotle, and biblical interpretation remained central. Yet the available philosophical grammar shaped what could be stated coherently. Theology became a disciplined effort to hold together claims that pulled in opposite directions: transcendence and incarnation, unity and distinction, immutability and love. Plotinus, writing in the 3rd century, offered one of antiquity's most powerful visions of transcendence. At the summit of reality stands the One, beyond being and intellect, beyond every ordinary predicate. From the One proceeds intellect, from intellect, soul, and through soul, the ordered living cosmos. This procession is not a temporal construction project and not a decision made after hesitation. Reality flows from superabundant unity, the way light radiates from a source without diminishing it. The universe becomes a hierarchy of dependence, every level tracing its existence toward what exceeds description. Plotinus's one is not a personality enlarged to cosmic scale. It does not deliberate between options or learn new facts. To describe it positively is already to risk dividing what is absolutely simple. The spiritual task is therefore an ascent from scattered sensation toward intellect and from intellect toward union, beyond discursive thought. This is philosophically sophisticated, psychologically penetrating, and slightly terrifying. The closer the seeker approaches the ultimate, the less remains that resembles a familiar person. At the summit of theology, language discovers that its highest object cannot answer to a name. Augustine encountered Platonist thought before becoming one of Latin Christianity's most influential theologians. It helped him conceive God as incorporeal and evil, not as a rival substance, but as a privation, a corruption of the good. Yet he insisted that Christian revelation supplied what philosophical assent could not: humility, grace, incarnation, and a history of salvation. In Augustine, the eternal God is not stretched through time. Past, present, and future belong to created experience, while divine knowledge does not wait for events to arrive. Augustine's synthesis profoundly shaped Western ideas of omniscience, eternity, immutability, creation, will, sin, and grace. It also intensified enduring psychological tensions. A God closer to the self than the self could know every hidden motive, making inwardness a sacred courtroom. Memory became a vast interior chamber. Conscience became a place of encounter and exposure. The old gods watched cities from temples. Augustine's God watched the movement of desire itself. Divinity had moved inward, and privacy became metaphysically impossible. Jewish philosophers continued their own negotiations between scripture and reason. Long after Philo, thinkers working in Islamic societies encountered Aristotle and late Platonism in Arabic, then used those traditions to ask how divine unity, creation, prophecy, law, and human intellect fit together. The most famous later Jewish example, Maimonides, would argue that positive descriptions of God risk importing creaturely qualities into absolute unity. Negative theology offered a severe discipline. We may say more safely what God is not than comprehend what God is. In the Islamic philosophical tradition, Al-Farabi treated metaphysics as a demonstrative science capable of addressing disputes about God's unity, attributes, causality, and relation to the world. Drawing on Aristotle and late antique interpreters, he described a first cause and an ordered series of intellects. Philosophy, prophecy, and political order became connected without becoming identical. The philosopher grasped truths demonstratively. The prophet communicated them through images suited to a community. Religion could thus be understood as truth translated into symbol. A powerful idea and a dangerous one wherever guardians of literal meaning held authority. Avicenna gave the tradition one of its most influential arguments. Everything we encounter is possible in itself. It may exist, or it may not. If such contingent beings exist, their existence requires a cause. The explanatory series ultimately depends on a necessary existent whose non-existence is impossible. From necessity, Avicenna reasoned toward unity, simplicity, intellect, and causal priority. God was no longer established chiefly by beginning from physical motion. The argument began with existence itself, turning the divine into the answer to why possibility is ever actual. Avicenna's system crossed religious boundaries. Muslim, Jewish, and Christian thinkers studied, adapted, and attacked it. Its account of an eternally dependent cosmos raised questions about creation in time, while its strong divine necessity seemed to place pressure on freedom. Yet its conceptual reach was extraordinary. Essence and existence, necessity and contingency, intellect and emanation became shared instruments in a multilingual debate. The philosophical God was not owned by one civilization. It traveled through translation, and every translation quietly altered the theology that received it. Averroes defended Aristotle against what he regarded as Avicenna's departures and against theological attacks on philosophy. He argued for the legitimacy of demonstrative reasoning and wrote commentaries that would reshape Latin intellectual life. His exact views on divine causality, knowledge, and providence are complex and contested, but his larger challenge was clear. Truth cannot finally contradict truth. If a revelation and demonstration appear to conflict, interpretation must examine whether Scripture is speaking figuratively and whether philosophy has actually proved what it claims. Across these traditions, divine attributes accumulated through argument. Unity answered the rivalry of many powers. Immateriality removed bodily limitation. Eternity protected God from decay. Immutability secured perfection. Omniscience answered ignorance. Omnipotence answered weakness. Perfect goodness answered moral caprice. Simplicity prevented God from depending on parts. Necessity prevented divine non-existence. Yet the attributes did not always sit peacefully together. Absolute simplicity complicates talk of multiple qualities. Timeless knowledge complicates response. Perfect goodness collides with suffering. Unlimited power raises questions about freedom and logical possibility. This is where metaphysics becomes psychology. Human beings do not merely ask whether a God exists. They ask what kind of reality can bear the weight of fear, guilt, injustice, and death. The human-like gods made emotion cosmic but left heaven morally unstable. The philosophical God offered order, permanence, and intelligibility, but could become remote from grief. Theology repeatedly tried to possess both. A being beyond all change who nevertheless cares, a timeless mind that responds, an impassible perfection that loves. The contradictions may be failures, or they may reveal the incompatible needs hidden inside the word God. Today, believers and skeptics often debate God as though the concept arrived complete, untouched by history. It did not. The God discussed in a modern philosophy seminar carries traces of Homeric scandal, Xenophonian criticism, Parmenidean being, Platonic goodness, Aristotelian actuality, Stoic reason, Plotinian transcendence, scriptural revelation, and centuries of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic argument. To see that history is not to disprove divinity. It is to recognize that every definition is an artifact, a record of problems human minds were trying to solve. Perhaps the most unsettling transformation was not that the gods vanished, but that they became harder to see. Marble bodies dissolved into attributes. Stories became symbols. Divine action became causality. Divine wisdom became intelligible order. Divine presence became the ground of being. The old statues could be broken. An idea could enter the structure of thought itself. And once divinity became the answer to why anything exists, escaping the gods required more than leaving the temple. It required examining the concepts through which reality had learned to look sacred. If this journey has changed the shape of the question for you, subscribe to Unmasking the Gods. Here, we follow belief beyond the sanctuary and into the histories, fears, arguments, and desires that gave it form. The gods may wear fewer faces now, but their shadows remain inside our language whenever we speak of perfection, purpose, order, or what must exist. To unmask them is not to end the mystery. It is to discover how deeply the mystery has already entered us.